Okay, welcome to Module 5. We'll be discussing about the guiding principle, which is also part of the service value chain, right? And we'll talk about chapter 8 and 9, okay? And just a quick correction, right? I've adjusted the dates and sent you guys the updated course schedule. It was November 15 before, it should be 16, and so on and so forth, okay? So and before I move on as well, do remember that next week you would have Chris Ewell as your instructor, and it will still be the same format. Where at the last day, I would still be the one conducting the final exam and the team presentation. Okay, so let's head on to the textbook, right? For the agenda for today, we'll do the textbook, the muddiest point, and then we'll do the lecture slides, concept tests, and if we have more time, I'll discuss what we've learned in the hands on practices, right? Okay. So, chapter 8. So, chapter 8, again, we'll be talking about the guiding principles. Guiding principle is a recommendation. When we say recommendation, it is not something that is mandatory, or another word, that is something that is not strict or should be followed, right? So, recommendation that guides an organization in all circumstances, meaning in all situations, right? So, many things change in day to day operations. It means daily operations, okay? What are those things that can change? These are goals, key staff, right? So, meaning important employees, maybe like managers, subject matter experts, strategies, right? Types of work, okay? Management and organizational structure, also called restructuring, right? Guiding principles remain constant, meaning they are fixed, right? No matter what else changes. Using guiding principles allow organizations to integrate multiple ways of working and management methods within service management. Okay? An example, some organizations follow waterfall, some of them use agile and DevOps, right? DevOps is the word coming from development and operations. Okay? The principles allow different ways of working to be used while making sure appropriate outcomes are delivered. So here's a quick definitions of the three methods. Waterfall is a development approach that is linear and sequential with distinct objective for each phase of the development, right? So when they start something with waterfall, right? When they start planning and they, let's say, they move on to developing, right? It's hard to go back to planning, or they don't go back to planning again. Okay, they try to finish the cycle, which is usually a long cycle or long period, then that's done. In agile, right? In agile, they would have a shorter cycle so that once they are finished planning and developing, right, they can now go back to planning again without even finishing the whole product, software, or service, right? So, agile is an umbrella term. When they say umbrella term, it's a big term or a generic term for a collection of frameworks and techniques that together enable teams and individuals to work in a way that is typified by collaboration, prioritization, iterative, and incremental delivery and time boxing. So, what this means, if you do have another framework that has one or more of these qualities, it can be called an agile framework. Okay, so what are some of the examples? We have Scrum, Lean, and Kanban, right? Scrum allow one of the topics in Scrum is using these daily Scrum meetings. So usually people would have meetings for like 1 hour, right? And it takes a long time. It takes a productivity for your company, right? In the daily Scrum meetings, you would just have a stand up meeting where everyone stands up and they just report three things. What have they done? What will they do? And is there any roadblocks? So that is easier than just sitting through a 1 hour meeting. And another reason why they call it a daily stand up meeting, because it is more uncomfortable to just stand up for 1 hour, right? But yes, people don't really need to do the stand up, right? For lean, it's basically a framework that focuses a lot for improving inefficiencies in the processes, right? A quick example, if let's say you have an employee that requires to do maybe 5 clicks to input the data, and maybe we can improve the process to make it down to 2 clicks to input the data. And that itself is a process improvement. Okay. And basically, because this is a method or framework, you would have a set of guidelines of how to execute lean. Kanban is very flexible and is used by Toyota, the car manufacturing company, right? So it started when they used that in the manufacturing line. And a Kanban would look like this, right? A Kanban at the very easy level is, think about having sticky notes where you place in the board, right? So let's see, you can zoom in, right? So usually people would have at the very least 3 columns. One is to do, doing, and done. And it is very visible because when you come to the work, you would see a list of things that you can grab as to do. And you can also see the list of things someone or even you is currently doing. And it also shows which tasks are done, right? So that helps us lessen the meeting time and just look at the board and see what can we do to help, right? So this can be used for your personal studying as well, doing team projects, manufacturing company, software development, such as this one. You have to do, in progress, testing, and done. And to give you more like an example, let's say Jira is a tool that has Kanban. And for software development teams, they would have something like this, right? You would see tickets, right? Let's see if we can zoom in a bit. You would see something similar to this, right? They have the category, they would also assign to which person, right? And also in IT service management, they can also use this Kanban approach, right? So we can quickly check Kanban board, maybe ITSM. Let's see if we get something. Okay. So look, so we can have something like this, right? And what they're doing is basically checking for incidents, right? And putting that sticky note, or in this case, the card, and place it to the respective lanes, right? To whoever who is responsible. So what's nice about Kanban, it's very flexible according to your need. As you can see, if we can make this easier to understand, the first big column here is the to do, right? Actually, this includes the to do, right? And this is the done phase, right? And passing it to the respective department who needs to fix it. So you would have a Kanban board that could be a high level overview for managers. And you can also have a Kanban board for, let's say, employee level, right? I can give you another example. So let me check on some. Let's see, I have to log in first. Could be log in with Google. Okay, hold on. Okay, load faster. Right? So here's an example when we also delivered a similar program, but it's like day to day. And the way we collaborate, this is our teaching assistants, right? The way we collaborate to develop the course and materials look like this, right? So we have the to do, because this is already done. That's why you don't see any to do. And the doing and the done, right? We also categorizes them. And also it's flexible enough to put some of additional resources, right? Check another board. Let's see. So let's see if there's another example. So here's another example of a similar program that we use with our TAs to develop courses. And we have more tags to see that anyone can pick. It's urgent. Someone needs to review, right? And so on and so forth, right? So this is Trello. Trello is basically a uh, a company or a service that provides Kanban board. Okay, that was a segue. So let's just go back. And again, this is also very useful when you're studying. People use that to track what they're currently learning. Next is Devops. It's basically an organizational culture, right? That aims to improve the flow of value to customers, right? So DevOps also tries to solve inefficiencies, right? How? By making development and operations collaborate more, right? So it focuses on culture, automation. Again, you see the lean, measurement, and sharing. And I've shown you guys before DevOps versus traditional, and it would look like this, right? Where, okay, where's a good picture of this one? Um, right? DevOps is you have the development operations working together. I think I know the word versus handoff. Yep. So it used to be like this. right? And it might still be true in some cases. Let me just maybe open image in a new tab. Wow, that's so small. Okay. Okay, you get the point with the wall. So it used to be if the developers are finished working their app, they just hand it over to the operations team, meaning the IT team, to deploy the application, right? So the problem with this is the developers would just pass on their app, and then later on, the operations team would see a lot of problems, and it's so difficult to run it. So the development team builds it, and the operations team run it, right? In the DevOps culture, you now have development and operations collaborating, right? They don't release something or they don't release an application without having the operations collaborate with it, right? So the developers build it and the developers run it to see if it's working, right? So again, that helps eliminate a lot of inefficiencies, right? Let's remove this now. And again, just to emphasize that DevOps is a culture, right? So the guiding principles should encourage and support continual improvement, right? That is the purpose of these, right? They apply across the organizations at all levels, and all staff should be aware of them. That's why it has to be all levels. If only, let's say, the employees do it, and let's say your manager or your senior management doesn't support it, it will fail, right? In each situations, staff and organizations should consider their principles and what is applicable, right? So we're seeing agile is very, very good, but not everything works with agile. As I mentioned before, if you're, let's say, building a rocket ship, you it is almost impossible to do agile because you really need to build the rocket and then you launch it and then you'll know if it's working or not. And that is using a type of a waterfall method. Okay? So that's why not all principles are relevant in every situation. Okay? They have to be reviewed on each situation or occasion to assess if they are the correct or the right one, right? So the guiding principles are, right, is focus on value, start where you are, progress iteratively with feedback, collaborate and promote visibility, think and work holistically, look at the big picture, keep it simple and practical, don't make it complicated and hard to execute, optimize and automate. If you do something over and over again, you need to automate it. So, our first guiding principle is to focus on value, right? So, in everything the organization does, it should link back directly or indirectly to value for itself, its customers, and other stakeholders. So, everything that it does in those activities that we mentioned in SVS, right? It should at least give some value, or else it doesn't really help, right? Services that offer value are attracted to customers, right? Services must also offer value to the service provider organization, right? And usually the value for the service provider organization is improve processes, right? And that usually reduces cost to the organization. Focusing on value can include understanding and identifying the consumer, understanding the consumer's perspective of value, mapping value to intended outcomes, and understanding that these can change over time. And also understanding customer experience and or user experience. So what are customer experience and user experience? Customer experience is the sum of functional and emotional interactions with the service and service provider as perceived by a service consumer. Think of this as where you are interacting with a customer support, right? Is it functional and emotional, right? I mean, uh, do they provide good customer service, right? Is it seamless, meaning is it smooth transaction, right? For user experience, it is the experience of interacting with product or service, focusing on usability and aesthetics. For example, user interface, touch, feel, interaction, graphics, content, features, ease of use. So it's sometimes also known as digital experience. So we do experience this all the time, right? An example is, for example, you do want to interact with this textbook, right? And let's go back to clicking. And let's say it requires you to do 2 clicks to go to the next page. That is a bad user experience because you should only give 1 click to go to the next page, right? And another thing that would be bad for the user experience is, let's say you are trying to click this one, but it goes backwards, right? Or let's say the arrow is not here. Maybe it's somewhere here, very far away. So that's also a bad user interface. Or maybe instead of using arrows, they're using something else, right? Maybe a square, and that's bad. Next, the guiding principle number 2 is start where you are, right? It means that you should know what's your current situation before you start doing anything, right? So, start where you are is in the process of eliminating old and unsuccessful methods or services and creating something better, right? There is a great temptation to remove what has been done in the past and build something completely new. This is rarely necessary or a wise decision. This approach can be extremely wasteful, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of loss of existing services, processes, people, and tools that could have significant value in the improvement, right? Do not start over without first considering what is already available to be leveraged. Okay? So, in your company, before you even think about doing something new, right? First check if your existing resources or processes or services is already available, right? And could be improved. Okay? So it's the same thing as, for example, instead of building a application from scratch, well, if there's a service already that lets you build application very easily, right, and is readily available, or your company is already using it, why not just use it, right? Another example, let's say in our school, right? Or let's say in your school, let's say you already have, um, let's say, what's a good example for technology? Oh, okay. Let's say you guys already have an email service, right? Let's say Alibaba email service or QQ email service in your school, right? So why not just use that given that your school already has that service instead of the school creating their own email service or a department or the students, right? So change can be an evolution or a revolution, right? Revolution is more disruptive and can have unforeseen negative consequences, right? Because when we say revolution, you completely change a lot of things where you put a lot of your people as well that can be uncomfortable with the big change, right? So before making any change or improvement, it is important to assess the current position and see if anything can be reused or built on, right? An example we can use if, let's say, the way that we're conducting the class, right? Instead of doing video chat, and then we'll say, okay, starting tomorrow, no more video chat. We'll just do a different way, right? Maybe using virtual reality, right? Which is so difficult to set up, right? And it's very disruptive. It changes the whole thing. Maybe you need a different type of access, right? So that can have unforeseen negative consequences. Evolution could be more easier, where let's say we improve a process, right? Maybe using a different video chat and very easy to join and log in, right? And everyone knows how to do it. Okay. So start where you are can include assessing where you are, right? It's basically trying to understand or trying to find out where you are, right? What's your current situation? You observe current services, processes, and methods, right? So it means that you don't go looking outside right away, right? You go look inside, right? It's like saying that, um, let's say you have a phone, right? And you want to know the time, and you end up buying another watch, right? Where your phone already provides the time, right? So that is observing current services. Well, you already have it. You may just not know, right? Use measurement to analyze what is being observed. Remember that measuring can affect the results of what is measured. Okay, to apply the principle successfully, you have to be objective as possible, right? Meaning, don't just say, oh, this is what I feel, right? It's more like, do you have the data to basically back up, right? Meaning, to basically have a good reason, you have to provide data that, yes, this would provide us to know where we are, right? Assessing whether current practices and services can or should be replicated or expanded. Using risk management skill to support decision making and recognizing that sometimes nothing from the current state can be reused. So as long as you did your job on checking first what you have and then later finding out that we can't really reuse, so that's fine, right? Okay, we can skip that part. So guiding principle number 3. We progress iteratively with feedback, right? So we do want to resist the temptation to do everything at once. Even huge initiatives must be accomplished iteratively. By organizing work into smaller, manageable sections that can be executed and completed in a timely manner, the focus on each effort will be sharper and easier to maintain. Okay? So, feedback can help the service provider organizations to understand end user and customer perception of value. So, even though you have planned and you have written what's to be expected of the value, you still want to ask the customer what do they see the value of it. It could be the same, it could be different, right? You would The company might think that their service is very good, but the customer might think that their service is very poor, which leads to valuable and not valuable. The efficiency and effectiveness of their services and value chain, which is process improvement, the effectiveness of governance and management controls, okay, interfaces between organizations and suppliers and partners, demand for products and services, improvement opportunities, risks, and issues. So, the benefits of working iteratively, right, and using feedback makes the organization more flexible, responsive to changing requirements, which is all the time. Us humans do change our mind a lot, right? Capable of identifying and responding to failures, and also being quality focused, right? To successfully apply this principle, you have to be comprehending the whole, right? Meaning you understand the big picture, but when you do something, right, or you start developing something, you start small. You make small changes until you have a complete product. Okay? That the ecosystem is always changing, right? So feedback is essential. That is being flexible. Going fast doesn't mean work is incomplete. Iterations may be small, but they are still producing results. So it means that, let's say you just build something every 3 months, maybe a small feature, right? Even though that is a small feature, but you're still producing results. You're still providing added value to your consumers. Okay. Next is to collaborate and promote visibility. Okay, when initiatives involve the right people in the correct roles, effort benefits from better buy-in, right? It means that they are more convinced, or maybe they're more likely to agree on the idea or the service, the value of the service or product, right? More relevance and increased likelihood of long-term success. Hey, collaboration can be viewed as working together. So that's an easier word when you say working together. That is collaboration, right? If they share a goal, it can help to remove silos. We already know what silos is, being isolated, right, within organizations, allowing everyone to work together more effectively. Collaboration can happen anywhere, inside and outside of the organization. It could be from external suppliers, customers, right? It could be also with internal teams. Okay, to promote visibility, right? Promoting visibility makes work more transparent in the organization, right? It means with collaboration, there's no isolation, right? And with us knowing more information on what's happening with other internal or external uh, customer, right? We can basically have a lot of improvements, right? But with that, you have to understand what is a priority. Which one is really needed, right? Which one should we do first? Okay? Balance improvement work and daily work, right? We already mentioned that in the previous chapters, where if you just focus on process improvements, that's not good. If you just focus on your daily work and not improving your process, that's not also good, right? So you also need to understand the flow of work, right? Meaning where does one input goes to where, and where does this output being used by, let's say, another department or another team, right? It's like checking where the data flows, right? Understand where there are bottlenecks, right? When we say bottlenecks, these are part of the process that is basically slowing down the process, or it's part of the process where it's inefficient, right? And we can show you a quick image of what a bottleneck is. And it does come from the word from the neck or mouth of a bottle, right? And we can first check, right? If you have a lot of liquids and this is the bottleneck, right? And it only can, let's say, send out one circle of the time, right? Meaning you can't throw all the liquid or all the water, right? You have to do it little by little, right? And it can apply to a lot of things. On the left image, you would see a bottleneck where the road becomes one lane from three lanes, and this would slow down the traffic. Another example would be for computers where there's a CPU bottleneck, right? And the data can't be processed fast enough, right? Let's see in manufacturing, right? So manufacturing, we can say that there's A, B, C, and let's say in the process C, there is a bottleneck. For example, if let's say we have a car manufacturing process, okay, we can check this, open image in new tab, to super small. How about this one? Open image in new tab, also very small. Let's try to zoom in instead. So let's say you have all these processes, right? Okay. And let's say that without even seeing it clearly, all of them is very fast and efficient, right? Let's say you have the building of the car body, right? You have the painting, and let's say the last is you basically assemble, right? If let's say you are able to build five cars at a time, but you are only able to paint one car at a time, so now the bottleneck is here because you have, let's say, five cars ready to be going to the next process, but because this certain process, which is painting the car, can only take one car at a time, so that slows down the whole process of having a ready car to be sold to the customer or to be delivered to the customer. Okay, so after bottlenecks, we have to identify where time, resources, and money are being wasted. To apply this principle successfully, service provider organizations need to consider that collaboration does not mean consensus, right? It means that it does not require for everyone to say yes. meaning for everything to say yes. Here, it says it's not essential or important that everyone agrees, but they must understand why decisions are made, right? So it is always important to ask the why, okay? Communication must match the audience. Different stakeholder groups will need different message and communication type, right? Just for example, you have business owners and technical people, right? You have to present the same data in a different way. How? Right? For the business people in your company, you might present more of numbers and figures that relates to more of the performance of the company or more of the financials of the company, maybe the costs, the revenue, the expenses, right? When you now show, let's say, the same data to the technical people, you may show them again some of the performance, maybe in inefficiency, like time, like resources that are used or utilized. Okay. Next is good decisions can only be made when there is visible data to support them. Okay, that is transparency of data. Okay, we'll keep moving on, and then we'll just have a break after we finish the textbook. So, guiding principle 5, think and work holistically, meaning you do want to check the big picture, right? So, think and work holistically means no service, practice, process, department, or supplier stands alone, right? You need to know and you need to see the connection between them. The outputs that the organization delivers to itself, its customers, and other stakeholders will suffer, right? Unless it works in an integrated way, connected way, to handle its activities as a whole rather than separate parts. Okay? This is similar to collaboration, right? All the organization's activities should be focused on the delivery of value. Okay? To apply the principle, organization need to consider that the complexity of the system will affect how this principle is applied. Higher complexity can create challenges. You have to make it simple to execute, simple to understand, right? Collaboration, as I mentioned, supports holistic thinking and working. Automation can support holistic working, right? Patterns in the needs of interaction between system elements can help identify holistic viewpoint. Okay? So, again, you have to think about the big picture and not just focus on one thing, right? Collaborate so it works. Okay? Guiding principle 6. Keep it simple and practical. Right? So what is this? You always want to use the minimum number of steps to accomplish an objective. Outcome-based thinking should be used to produce practical solutions that deliver value outcomes. Processes and services are designed to meet majority of consumers' needs. Every exception cannot be designed for. What it means that if I'm a customer and I say, "Hey, I want this new feature," right? If I'm only the one asking for that request, that cannot be designed for just for me. But if, let's say, 80% of the customer says, "I want this new feature," then it will most likely be developed or created. So, it is better to create rules than that can be used to handle exceptions when necessary. Okay? To apply this principle, We have to ensure value comes from every activity. Recognize that simplicity can be more challenging to create than complexity, right? Because again, if you just try to solve problems without really designing how to solve it correctly or efficiently, you might create a lot of complexity and a lot of inefficiency, right? And that's why it is more challenging to simplify it, right? Okay, you want to do fewer things and do them better. Respect people's time. Don't make them do unnecessary work. Consider that simplicity can support quick wins. And remember, the processes or services that are easy to understand are more likely to be used. For this one, right? If you are in a small organization, reducing some of the complexity might not feel a lot. Let's say, oh, there's a 5% improvement for the process, right? That's just nothing. Let's say maybe that's just 5 minutes, right? But if you're a very, very large organization, that 5% is a lot, right? Maybe that 5% of that 5 minutes, you would save a lot of money, okay? It's the same thing as where you play sports or you play online games, right? If you're just a beginner or don't really compete, let's say you increase by 5% in how good you are in playing the game or winning the game, does not really matter a lot. But once you're now let's say, a competitor, or maybe you do competition, right? Now that 5% increase matters a lot. Okay. Next is remember that processes or services are easy to understand, right? If you do have a process that is so hard to follow, right, there are bound to be more errors, human errors, right? And could lead to a lot of data errors as well, or data quality management issue, right? Simplifying the process make it easier to understand and less likely for people to have an error. Guiding principle number 7, you have to optimize and automate, right? When we say automate, we make things automatic, right? It's not manual, right? So organization must maximize the value of work carried out by their human and technical resources. The 4 dimensions model provide a big picture of various constraints or limitations, resource types, and other areas that should be considered when designing, managing, or operating an organization. Technology can help organizations to scale up and take on frequent and repetitive tasks, right? Allowing human resources to be used for more complex decision making, right? So, for example, let's say I want to copy an information from a website, or let's give a perfect example. Let's say I get your muddiest point in a Word document and then I copy them over here, right? If I'm just gonna do this maybe a few times in a year, that's fine. But if I have to do this every day in a year, I should create an automation where, let's say, I can automatically get the data from the Word document and put it here in the PowerPoint in maybe just 1 clicks, 2 clicks, instead of just copy pasting manually. Okay. However, technology should not always be relied upon without the capability of human intervention. As automation, for automation's sake, can increase costs and reduce organizational robustness and resilience. Again, because if you do add another process, which is an automation, that automation that was built can also have a lot of flaws or errors or bugs, right? And also, maybe that automation is really good. However, it might be very costly to develop or very costly to obtain. Okay. Okay. Optimization means to make something as effective and useful as it needs to be. Before an activity can be effectively automated, it should be optimized to whatever degree is possible and reasonable, right? So, next is automation typically refers to the use of the technology to perform a steps or series of steps correctly and consistently with limited or no human intervention. Okay? Humans are not perfect. They make errors, they get tired, they might type the wrong things, they might click the same things. Computers are dumb or are not wise, but they can do the same task over and over with more accuracy than humans. That's why we do want to create automations. So, going back to optimization, these activities include understanding and agreeing the context of optimization, assessing the current state, right? Knowing where you currently are, agreeing to future state and prioritize, and focusing on simplification and value, right? Again, improving processes also gives value. Ensuring stakeholder engagement and commitment. If you don't have the support of management, it is also not going to be successful. Executing improvements iteratively, so you do small changes, right? But you still add value, even by little. Monitoring the impact of optimization continually, because there might be a point where you did build an automation, but if it takes the same time or it does the same amount of error as a human would do, then it might not make sense. Or let's say you have this automation, but this is so expensive that it doesn't make sense. Another quick example, let's say in manufacturing companies, you would now think which is more efficient and let's say more cheap, right? Do you want to have 50 people working on, um, let's say building something, or let's say packing a package, right? Or do you buy a very expensive machine to do the packaging for you, right? That could depend now if the country's labor cost is cheap, maybe it's better to just hire a lot of people to do that process. Where if you have a country or location where human labor, right, is very expensive, then it might make more sense to buy or invest in automation or machinery that can automate processes. Okay, so important to simplify and optimize first before doing automation, right? The reason why is you might have an inefficient process and then you automate that inefficient process, right? Which is bad. So let's say you have an inefficient 5 steps of a process, and when you automate that, it still would take 5 steps, could be faster, right? But it's not the best, right? So what you want to do, if let's say you have a manual process of 5 steps, that is not good. You try to first make it optimize, make it better. Maybe you did reduce it to 3 steps of the manual process. So that's, let's say, now optimized. And then now once that is optimized, then you can now automate that so that your automation could maybe just take 3 steps as well. Okay? So automation can include focusing on simplification and optimization before automation, as we said here. Defining metrics to measure impact and value, right? It should outweigh positive impacts than negative impacts to have value. Using complementary guiding principles, as we have mentioned before. Okay? So this is not already part, and we mentioned about the benefits of automation, less human intervention. Right? So to get ready to automate, we can just skip to the 4 areas, right? You have to simplify the process before automating. You clarify the process before automation. Make sure it's clear, you understand the process. You reduce the end user contact, meaning you reduce the human contact with the underlying systems and processes, right? And you don't want to rush to automate complex or non-routine tasks. And again, if this is something that you would only do a few times, right, it might not make sense to automate. So for service management automation, there's a lot of tools, right? Instead of having a human saying that, okay, a customer has called, I can manually put it to an incident or a problem, right? A level 1, a level 3, a level 2, right? But if we can automate some of this where a customer would call or email, and then you have a system that would already automate and, let's say, put it to this incident, or maybe this goes to a problem management tool, and then it automatically would put which level is it? Is it a level 1, level 2, or level 3, right? Okay, so this is just repeating what we've already mentioned, right? Okay, so I don't really think that we have to go about these because these are now specific to website and having a content management system, deploying the app, and so on and so forth. But as long as you understand the foundation, this should be easy to understand. Okay, so would be a good stopping point, and let's continue. Oh, maybe let's continue this one because I think this is just one page. Okay. Okay, let's continue on with the chapter 9, the governance portion. All right, it's responsible for evaluating, directing, and monitoring an organization's activity, including service management. Every organization is directed by a governing body. What is governing body? Examples could be a person or a group of people who are accountable, meaning responsible, right, at the highest level for the performance and compliance of the organization, right? Compliance, meaning they have to stick to the rules, stick to the law and regulation, meaning they have to follow. All sizes and types of organization perform governance activities. The governing body may be a board of directors, executive managers, right, to take on a separate governance role where they are performing governance activities. The governing body is accountable for the organization's compliance with policies and any external regulation. Okay? The level of governance would depend, right? It could be by size, the type of industry, right? Whether it's publicly listed company or a privately listed company, and also the culture which is operate. Right? If the governing body doesn't provide clear direction, there is a risk that managers will make decisions that are not aligned with the organization's overall goals. An example would be Consider Volkswagen emission scandal. So Volkswagen is a car manufacturing company, right? And they have the vision to be a globally leading provider of sustainable mobility. And that includes being a role model for the environment, safety, and integrity. So the vision was not understood by the departments, meaning that was the vision for from the top, right? But the people at the bottom didn't recognize that vision, didn't follow the importance of the vision, and they were creating tests that allowed polluting vehicles on the road, meaning they are basically building cars that are not efficient in burning fuel, right? And it's causing environmental problems. And it's a decision that ultimately destroyed shareholder value as well as damaging Volkswagen reputation with a broader group of stakeholders. So if you just find these scandal, you would find a lot of videos talking about the Volkswagen scandal, right? And how they try to uh, trick the customers, right? Or basically lie to their consumers. Okay. So now this would be the end of 8 and 9 chapters. Once we go back, we'll discuss the muddiest point and summary of the slides and so on and so forth. Okay, now would be a good time to take a 15-minute break and see you guys later. Let's now tackle on questions from the class. So from Ethan, um, his question was, if the service provider manipulates the feedback, is it deceptive or illegal? Um, I would say it's very deceptive. Some cases there might be no laws to make it illegal, but in some places it is illegal, right? And for example, Amazon's product review function, right? So this has been a big problem for Amazon, and there's a lot of short documentaries on how Amazon is trying to solve it, right? Through checking customer patterns on um, what's a good feedback or bad feedback, right? Or also doing machine learning, right? Because nowadays there's a lot of suppliers. What they do is they contact or they promote products in, let's say, Facebook, and they would say, if you buy my product and leave a good review, I can refund you for the amount you purchased in Amazon, right? So what happens now is you would get a lot of reviews that are deceptive, right? Or fake, or because um, their feedback was essentially bought, right? The supplier bought the reviews, right? For the supplier or that company, right? For the supplier or that company, it only costed them, let's say, $40, $50. But if they can essentially spend like a lot of them, right, and have a lot of fake or deceptive reviews, then it will be a top one product in Amazon and it will be very misleading, right, or deceptive to the consumers, right? So Amazon does have this problem, right? Like some of the criteria they're checking right now is if a user just puts 5 star without any explanation or a very detailed information about the product, then it is most likely it is a fake review, right? And then also Amazon can see your purchase history, that you started purchasing a lot of items out of the ordinary. So that's another red flag for them, meaning that's something that they would look into, right? So I guess the answer is it is very deceptive and should be illegal. Okay, from Chris, how to remove silos within organizations. It is through collaboration, communication, having a shared vision, right? Transparency. And can it be eliminated? Yes, it can be eliminated, especially when organizations are now forced to change to adapt to the current conditions, right? Or to make the processes more efficient, right? To survive. If they are now in survival mode, definitely they would try to collaborate. So, this is, I guess, just a summary, right? The practice part made me realize the importance of a team's communication should be put in the first place because it is easy to have a situation where two people think the other has done it and don't do it. So, and he said, I think it is more important than trust. If you trust your partner blindly, you may make mistakes without realizing it. You need to trust your partner's ability, but you should be suspicious of his potential for error. So, suspicious could be more of a negative word if that is your coworker or partner. They do have this term which is more positive, which is trust and verify. So you do trust that person, but at least you also want to check if it is correct or not, right? You don't want to be suspicious because suspicious is more like, oh, is he doing something bad, right? So not should be trust and verify. Okay, from Jay, in the IT outsourcing market, there are some drawbacks in the on site human services, which cannot fully meet the needs of customers. For enterprises, the cost of human resources is generally high. Second, the lack of service awareness of engineers. Customer experience is not very good. Third, the mismatch between service content and customer demand is troubling the whole IT outsourcing industry. Again, this would depend. If you did get IT outsourcing who has, let's say, a low rating or is very cheap, right? Then you might be bound to have a bad IT outsourcing partner, right? But that is not true most of the case, right? There are so many big companies that their service is IT outsourcing, right? And again, those who don't do well in IT outsourcing, they don't really survive in the market. Okay. But we also have to think about, right? Um, just for example, in my country, in the Philippines, right? Uh, we are we don't really have a lot of resources as well. So our ITSM in our companies is very poor. The customer service is poor, the service is poor, but the customers doesn't really have a lot of choice because there are only a few providers they can choose, right? Unlike in bigger countries such as China or in the US, they can basically have a lot of competition and a good competition, meaning if you have good competition in the market, it means there's a high chance that the quality of service or product is good, is high. Okay, for Porygon, optimize and automate is the most interesting topic. When designing, managing, or operating an organization, technology can help organizations scale up and perform frequent and repetitive tasks. Okay, so yeah, this is coming from the textbook. Yep. How is the level of automation management now? Are they any examples of involvement of artificial intelligence? Definitely there is, right? A lot of like some of the products, right? they can do machine learning and machine artificial intelligence to check which services or which products can definitely be more effective, right? And also automate that. So it does exist, but the question is, it's not yet out there a lot, right? Okay, let's say automation refers to human machine system consisting of human and computer technology, equipment, and management control objectives, the core of which is the management of information system. It can quickly process large amount of information quickly, okay, and finally by people to analyze the results and make decisions, right? And just to add, also aside from automation, you can basically create uh, or have a tool that helps you with the decision, right? That could analyze the results, right? To say that, hey, this is good, we should continue doing it, right? Right? Or this is bad, we should not continue doing it. So you can even have those like almost decision making, right? Helps you with this decision making. Okay, improve productivity, accuracy. From Jenny, think samples of structure. Let's go to the question. For formal or informal management, how much of the role is governed by explicit rules and regulation? It really would depends on the organization, and because we have now tackled upon governance, it is depends on the governance team if they do enforce it strictly or not. Centralized or decentralized management, what percentage of decisions are taken by a centralized team? Well, if it's a centralized team, could be 100%, right? Because when you say decentralized, it means that not only one team handles the decision making process. Okay. How will DevOps improve the organizational culture of the customer value stream? So with DevOps, you have more collaboration between development and operation, more improvement of processes, right? Less errors, more testing, right? And then that is basically a value add, right? So it adds to the value stream for the customer, right? For the customer, they might receive an application that is more likely to be good or up and running, right? Than not doing a DevOps culture where the operation, if they're isolated from development, might end up deploying an application or providing a service that doesn't work. From Linda, vague relationship between SVS and ITIL. Can I think of it as a general framework for ITIL 4? So ITIL 4 introduces the SVS, right? So the difference. Yeah, so if you check on the previous version for ITIL 3, 2, or even 1, right? Some may have already touched on the topic, but only in ITIL 4 that they are more clear about then they created this concept called the SVS, right? The service value system. So from Alice, start where you are, right? It says that can be evolution or revolution. And revolution is more disruptive and can lead to negative consequences. But why? Is it because retrofitting is easier than starting from scratch, right? So it would depend, right? I've heard stories from organizations where retrofitting is easier, okay? But if you do have an existing service that is so complicated, or maybe the, let's say, the system or the code that it was built from is very old, right? And it just makes sense to start from scratch, right? So what companies would do is they still have their existing old service, and they would start building the same service with, let's say, improved processes and technologies, right? Maybe the latest language, right? And then they try to build that. And once this is okay, they would do test it for, let's say, 5% of their customers, right? And if now this same application works with the newer technology, then they can now remove this old technology, right? That has the same service. What I meant. Okay. So that, to answer this in another way as well, is if your service was simple or is maintained properly, right? Then it's easier to retrofit. Why is no service, practice, process, department, or supplier isolated? Mm, I guess the question is why should not why should service, practice, process, department, or suppliers be not isolated, right? Again, more collaboration, meaning more efficiency. It means more value. Why do workflow and process flow automation require less manual intervention? Well, the automation word itself, if you have more manual intervention with that automation, then it is not automation to begin with, right? So let's say you have an existing process where your employee needs to interact, or maybe uh, interact, another word for interact, maybe to use um, or go to use that certain thing, let's say 5 times, right? And let's say you created a an automation, right? And now with that automation, let's say the employee now has to do 10 things, right? 10 things. So that itself created more manual intervention, right? And defeats the purpose of automation. Okay. What is not suitable for automation? A quick example are decision making, right? Uh, for example, like doing surgery, right? Teaching kids. So the more you require human element, the more the service requires human, the human nature, the human behavior, then that is not suitable for automation, right? So from Randy, um, I guess I copy pasted it wrong. And I think the question was, hold on, I think I somehow remember the question. And quickly check that. Chen. Let's see. And then the other one is Tingyo. Yeah, so I remember this question, and this was the question. After I reviewed the contents of these two chapters, I found that the company requires employees to have the ability to recognize value. But I only have one question. What can be regarded as value? I really like that question, right? So, value, as we've been mentioning, has a lot of different thing. Depends on someone, right? It depends on the customer, the consumer, what it perceives as valuable, right? So, for people, right, values can differ a lot, right? And I can just send this picture. And hopefully you can also get this. And just in case, I'll save the PDF. Hold on. If you guys want to look at what are some of the values. Okay, hold on. And where's that? Okay, so it can be from social impact, life changing, emotional, and functional, right? So we can start with the very top, right? When we say self transcendence, right? It is, think of it's like a big, more than big than life changing. Let me find a better word. So, transcendence is experiencing something beyond the normal experience, right? Beyond the physical level, right? It could be like feeling that, oh, God do really exist, right? So that is like self transcendence, right? And let's say you're believing about uh, what's this feng shui, right? Uh, and that's what, if it's that would bring you value, it is also a value. Okay, these are all values. Life changing, right? You can provide a service that provides hope, self actualization, right? Motivation, heirloom. Heirloom could be, let's say you have a service that, let's say you have a black and white photos of your grandparents, right? Or your yeye, right? And maybe they can colorize that picture of your grandfather, right? So we don't need to talk all, we can just check a few, right? For example, emotional. That's why I've been saying before when I asked you, some of you, about games, right? Getting fun or entertainment provides value to you, then that service makes sense. That product makes sense, right? So reduces anxiety. Games can also help that, right? Nostalgia is basically remembering something like an old memory, right? Maybe playing a game that you played when you were young, right? You were a kid. Let's say the very first Pokemon game or the very first Pokemon animation. So that would provide you nostalgia, right? Next is functional. Most of the time we do interact this, right? Can it make you money? Would it save you time, right? Would it reduce costs? Would it avoid hassle? Instead of going to the restaurant, you can just order in an app, right? And I think I haven't zoomed this better, right? So, does it give you information? Okay, so these are things that would give us value. Okay, so now do think deeper, right? Value is not only money, right? Value is not only cost and time. Value is anything that a person would think is valuable to them. That's why another good example is, let's say you're playing a game, let's say League of Legends, right? And if buying that champion skin or aesthetics, meaning it doesn't really help you win the game, but if you feel happy about it, then there's value. Okay? So that ends the modest point. And let's go and summarize quickly. So, we have been talking about the guiding principles, and these are the guiding principles, right? Focus on value, start where you are, progress iteratively with feedback, collaborate and promote visibility, think and work holistically, keep it simple and practical, optimize and automate. So do remember that a guiding principle is a recommendation, right? It's not strictly enforced. It's not required. Okay. So it does help in goals, strategies, types of work, or management structure, right? These are the same things that we showed you, 7 ITIL guiding principles. When you want to focus on value, you think about what would add to the value, right? It would you would need to identify the consumer perspective of value. So the picture that I've shown you earlier, right? And then knowing that value changes over time and make sure that the customer is happy with the experience. It is a good experience for them and also the user. Uh, let's see. This is from the textbook as well. So maintain a focus on the improvement. Okay. Start where you are. The important part here is you assess your current situation, right? You don't just go look and start building something new without checking if maybe in your company you already have existing services that you can use, right? Okay. We mentioned that already. So next is progressing iteratively with feedback, right? You don't want to just do everything at once in just one go. You want to make it smaller, repeated iterations, get feedback, right? Push smaller features, and as long as it adds value, even though it's small, that is fine. Okay. Then promoting visibility. So as you have more information on what's happening with other teams, it can better help with your decision, right? You can have more confidence that your decision is right. Okay. And again, to collaborate does not mean everyone is agreeing, but they at least understand why that is the decision. Think and work holistically. You don't focus on just one thing. Think of how it would impact the whole organization. Okay. Think of the big picture. How would this add value? Right? Not only value to this team, but to the organization. So again, collaboration and automation does help with that guiding principle. Keep it simple and practical is basically trying to improve the process to reduce the number of steps, making it more efficient. In another word for efficient is optimizing, right? If you can do fewer things in fewer steps, it is better. And just make sure it does provide value. Okay. It is also good to know, right? Making something simpler, right, is more harder to do or difficult to do. Okay. Optimize and automate. We already know this that we have to observe and basically check where our inefficiencies are, right? And don't forget that you have to optimize first before you automate, right? because not all automation would provide efficient results, right? Okay, so those are just the guides helping guide the optimize and automate. And again, the reference, and that should be good. Then now we'll quickly do the concept test, right? And this is the question for today. And that's already A, B, C, and D. Let me edit that. Let's do a quick edit. Let me just edit that and do a group voting. Okay. I'll give you guys um 10 minutes to complete this. And I just want to touch upon the hands on practices, just an overview of what we've learned, right? I wouldn't be going deep as there's not a lot of time now, but I would be explaining what you have learned. And let me just prepare some of it while you guys are doing the concept test. Okay, now it's time to give an overview to hands on practice, hopefully one, two, three, and four, right? And we'll be talking more of the Python, okay? Not really the VS Code or terminal, okay? So, one of the things that we have to learn that variables, right? They help us store data values, right? And do remember that when we store data values, I mean using a language, it is stored in the memory, meaning it's temporary. If you do want to store it like permanently or fixed, you do want to store it in your database or in a file, text file, right? So, one thing that we have to learn is in Python, there is no such thing as declaring a variable. If you had a C++ or Java class, right, you first have to initialize or declare a variable before you can even assign a value, right? Assign a value like a integer or a string, a list, right? Okay, so that is variables. One of the good things in Python as well is you can do multiple assignments, right? So that you save up lines, right? Instead of A equals to 5, B equals to 3.5, and C equals to hello, you can basically do A comma B comma C, right? Then assign the multiple values with commas as well, right? Again, make sure that you think about first when are you going to use this. If your values are uh, not for initialization or it is more complex, right? Or if this becomes more confusing, you should avoid it, right? But let's just say you want to have two empty lists, you can definitely do something like this. It should not confuse the reader of your code. Let's see. So data types, you guys should already know this by heart that there are integers, floats, and even complex numbers, right, for Python. It still supports true or false. We call this Boolean, right? A sequence type, when we say a sequence type, we can have a string or list, right? And it will basically allow us to iterate over them. And it's basically ordered. When I say iterate, we can go one by one, T, H, I, until N. Same with list. We can iterate over the list, so we can access this, physics, then chemistry, 1987, and then 2000. A tuple is somewhat similar to list, but it is in ordered collection also, but it is not mutable. When we say not mutable, it means the value cannot be changed once we assign a tuple to a variable. Okay. Dictionary object is an ordered collection of data, usually with a key value pair form, right? It has a very fast lookup, right? And to know that it's a dictionary, you would see they call this curly braces, right? And you have the key, and then separated by a colon, then the value, right? Just to quickly go back, tuple is enclosed in parentheses, or sometimes they call it circular brackets. For list, they are enclosed in square brackets, right? Strings can be enclosed with double quotes or single quotes. String functions, we can skip this because this is just a different use case, right? Okay, how about concatenation, right? So even though this is using the string function, right? Concatenate meaning it means that you combine things together, you add things together, right? In Python, right? If you use the plus symbol on integers or floats, meaning numbers, you add up the value. If there are strings and you put the plus symbol, it will basically put them together, right? Combine. And we have a lot of different operators, mathematical operators and other operators as well. That is similar to other languages. We also have what they call comparison operator, which when evaluated, right, it would be true or false, right? Do remember using one equals, right? It means you are assigning value to a variable, right? Again, if you are just using one equals, means that you're assigning value to a variable. When you now have two equals, it means you do want to compare, or another word, you do want to evaluate, right? If it's true or false. Okay. So logical operator is the and, or, and not, right? This will check if there are two things that are both true, right? For and operator, if both are true, then it becomes true. If one is false, then it becomes false, right? If all are false, it is also false. For the or operator, if both are true, it is true. And now the difference is if one is true and one is false, it still is true. But if all are false, the outcome would be false. Not is basically just a reverse, right? So basically, you can say not true to evaluate if it's not true. So membership operator is a good way to check if something is included, right? If something is a member, right? If you say with the in and not in, let's quickly go up, right? Give you an example. If let's say we did is let's say you grab the string physics, then you say physics in tuple, right? Because physics exists in this tuple variable, then it would return true. But if you, let's say, put math in tuple 1, it will return false because there's no math string here. And the not in is just the reverse. Okay. And here's an example, right? Identity is just saying is to compare the memory location of two objects. They don't have to be the same value, but they have to be in the same memory location. Okay. User input is very important when you need human interaction in your programs, right? And even though you are just having a user input in the console, right? You should also provide a good user interface, right? Does it give you a message, right, for what it requires for you, right? Does it give you other messages that tells you what it is all about, right? So even consoles, right, or terminals, they should still provide good user interface. Let's see, decision making, right? To do decision making, there is the conditional statement using the if and else, right? And you can also have a nested if statement where you have an if statement inside of an if statement, right? If you are into coding, and if we relate this to complexity and simplification or simplicity, right? If you don't research or understand the current process, you might end up creating a lot of, let's say, if else, if else, if else, right? And it is easier to implement, right? But now the complexity may increase, right? It's harder to understand and maintain. But if you ever figure out the correct logic and the correct way to simplify and present your logic, then now it's easier to understand, easier to maintain, and easier to improve. Okay, we also have loops, right, where you basically iterate over something, right? You can basically put a range of until when the loop will stop. With the while loop, it will keep looping until a certain condition is true. This is also known as the base case. If your while loop doesn't have a base case, or basically a statement that would catch a certain condition is true, then you would have an infinite loop and then your program would not stop. Okay, so for example, infinite while loop. Okay. While else. You can also do iteration using the in, right? For your variable name, that would be reassigned a new value, right? Every time. And you would have these. Okay, so this is more conditional. And to save more time, we'll close this up. Lists and tuples. I don't think we need to go over them, right? Uh, when we say append, right, it means you're adding to the list, right? Another word that they use in programming language is the push. So append or push, right? And append or push, usually you either push to the end or you add to the end, right? When we say insert, we do want to be more specific where we want to insert. It still can be at the end, at the beginning, or at the middle. So to remove an element, you can do the delete statement or the pop method. When we say pop, goes from the top, remove it. If you put the list like this is the end, you remove the last one. Okay? The remove method is similar to the insert, where now you can specify where you want to remove. Okay? So as you are learning any language, right, you must know how to use these tools, right? And this is also, we can tie up the concept of start where you are, right? So let's say you already have, you're using Python, right? And if you don't research well, and let's say you end up creating your own remove method, or you end up building your own append method, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't add value. That takes more time. That spends resources. Why? Because you already have remove method, you already have append method included in your Python language that you're using, right? So you have to know what your tools are, and you want to first maximize and learn all the things that you can use, okay, before looking at another tool. Then, if you can't find a certain functionality in a tool, that's a time you might want to think about checking other tools. Okay, so dictionaries and sets, right? We already mentioned how it looks like, right? We have key value pairing with key at the left side of the column and value at the right side of the column, right? It does provide a very fast lookup because of the hashing algorithm, right? And as in any data structure that's built in with a language, there are certain already built-in methods, right, to access, to update, to add, or to delete. Okay, you don't have to go and create a new one because it already exists. Okay, so because it's also a collection, you can still loop, or another word, iterate over a dictionary. All right, and set It looks like a dictionary with the curly brackets, but it does not have the key value pairing, right? It is also unordered and unindexed, right? If you need a visualization, what is a set? I don't think they show it here. So sets are basically like these, like this one. So you have to know the set theory, where let's say you have items in A and items in B, and you want to see which item have an intersection, right? Meaning which item does A have that also B has, right? And that is the set that Python is also using. Okay. And the last one I want to discuss is function, right? So the use of functions is to not do things over and over again, meaning to create reusable code, right? Let's say, let's check the first example, right? So yes, reusable code, right? I don't like the first example. How about passing arguments? Don't like that. Yeah, okay. Maybe let's just provide a simple example, which is not here, right? And that would be the last explanation, right? Let's say in your code, you want to add two numbers, right? And in another portion of your code in a certain process, you want to add two numbers. And then maybe in another code, you want to add two numbers again, right? You have to keep on creating that same line of code or equation, right? Instead of doing that, to avoid repeating yourself developing that logic, you basically put that logic inside of a function so that you just need to use the function and just input the parameters, meaning the values that you would want for the logic to use, right? I know adding sounds very simple, but if you now have a very complicated logic, right? And you don't really need to keep writing the same complicated logic, right? You can just put that complicated logic once in a function and then now just reuse the function. Saves you time, saves you writing a lot of code, right? Helps you maintain because now you just need to maintain one function, right? If there are errors, you just need to fix one block of code, which is the function, instead of if you did not use a function and there's, let's say, five same complicated code logic, and if there's one error, now you have to update five of those code blocks, right? Instead of one. Okay. So if you happen to master Python, it will be very helpful for you because it's, again, a general purpose programming language, which can help a lot in web development, software development, data science, machine learning, data visualization, scripting using automation, right? In like Devops, right? Doing unit testing, right? And so much more, right? We do know that there are other programming language way faster than Python, but Python is still very efficient and it's still easy to maintain. It's easy to read, right? And there is a lot of built-in functionalities that you can use right away, right? So that should be ending the hands-on practice overview. And Anytime you do have a question, if you, I don't think that we are no longer experiencing problem, you guys pushing your code to GitHub. But if there are any issues, let us know, me and Min, and we'll try to assist you. Okay, so this ends the session for today. And just to remind everyone that uh, come next week will be uh, a different professor, Chris Yule. For my task, I'll try to check all of your team project proposal and hope to give you a more timely feedback. Okay. Um, what else? So I think for next week, the chapters are longer. So please do spend time to finish them up. And also, I'm in the process of finalizing the grade for IS 345, which is cybersecurity. Please check your CTU email because I did send some of you who are missing assignments, and I don't want my students to have a low grade just because they did not submit assignments, right? And again, check your email because I've been emailing you and also Miss Monica so that you can submit your missing assignments, and I can now send her the final grade for that course. Okay? So that should be it for today. I really appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate meeting every one of you during the one on one video chat. And again, I'll be seeing you again at the last day. So I'll see you at the last day and see you next week and enjoy your lunch.